Hello, and welcome to the Thyroid Warrior Podcast. I'm Ebony, and I'm here as your wellness facilitator. I'm going to be sharing my experiences in managing Hashimoto's disease. I really hope that it'll help you on your personal journey. Keep in mind, however, this does not substitute for medical advice. It is only for your information and motivational purposes only. Now, let's get started.
Hello, everyone. I am so excited about this episode, and it is all about falling in love with yourself again. So last week I talked about finding your joy, and we talked about 4 things to get you there, and that's combating your fear with truth, creating a routine, remembering how far you've come, and slowing down. But this week, I really want to get into the meat and potatoes of what falling in love with yourself means. So my question to you to start with is this. Who are you? Let that sink in for a second. Who are you? Here's why I'm asking that question. I lost who I was in my marriage. I lost who I was within my friendships, and I did not stop to ask, who am I? What do I like? What do I want to do? And how can I really and truly just enjoy my life and who I am as a person? And in the process of doing this, it made it a lot easier for me to understand how to combat the fear with the truth. So even after listening to this episode, I recommend that you go back to last week's episode and just kind of walk through that now that you have a different lens and a way of thinking. So one of the biggest things that I struggled with was that I did not understand what I really wanted. I didn't understand how to articulate my needs. I did not understand how to be a good listener, and I just didn't know who I was. So in the process of going through all of that, I became so confused and frustrated because, again, I was looking at what everyone else was doing. I was trying to figure out, okay, well, this person has a thyroid disease and they're doing this, and that person has an autoimmune disease and they're doing that, and that's working, and this is happening, and that's happening. And I was stuck in the comparison nightmare of sorts because I was so busy trying to look and see what everyone else was doing to resolve their thyroid disease issues that I didn't even stop to process would those things even work for me. And now I actually started listening to my body and getting to know myself so that I can more accurately and appropriately take care of myself and lessen the symptoms and issues that I personally was having. So what that looked like was I sat down one day and I said, Ebony, what is it that you want? And what I also did was I asked the question of, okay, what do you want from a personal perspective, from a health perspective, and just from a how do I want to live my life? What do I want to do? What experiences do I want to have? So I started just dumping all of that on a sheet of paper, and it helped me so much because a lot of the things I wrote down just weren't accurate for where I was at the time. And I had crafted this idea in my head based upon what other people told me should be important and what I saw on social media. And that wasn't necessarily what I needed to be focusing on. So I took a step back, and then I asked the question, like, why is it so hard for me to love myself? And it was a very difficult thing to process and walk through because I didn't know. I did not know. I had no idea. And that's when therapy came in because that was very helpful. And I started walking through all of the past issues that I've had in my life, all of the current issues that I had and the things that I was working through and fighting against, honestly. And we started to break those things down and break them apart. And I had to learn how to have kindness, love, and compassion towards myself. And I also had to extend myself grace. Neither of those things were easy. But I worked at it, and it was hard. But at the same time, as I started doing that, I noticed that my anxiety and my stress started to minimize. And you may be thinking, why would I do that? How am I going to have time to do that? It did not take that much time. It literally was when I was driving, I would go back to that question. Right before I went to bed, I would think about it and say, well, what is it that I want? What can I do? What is my biggest struggle? And on the times where I actually could sit down and focus on it, that's when I would actually write it down. Because we live in such a fast-paced society, and because we're constantly bombarded with so many things, it can be very difficult to really and truly get to know ourselves. And last week when I talked about slowing down, that also helped me to realize, what do I need to refuel? What do I need to get this inflammation down? And that's when I started really brainstorming and coming up with figuring out ways to minimize as much stress as possible and to make the most efficient use of my time every day. And for me, that was hard because I don't like structure that much. But at the same time, I realized that I needed it in order to use my mental space for productive things. I can't worry about, well, what am I going to eat and what am I going to have for dinner and how am I going to cook this and what am I going to do once I get off work? That is really why I started doing more with meal prepping. Because I was tired of constantly having to think about that or going to the store or driving, coming home, sitting down, being exhausted, and then being frustrated because I just had to get back up to get in the car to go to the grocery store. So that is why I become so much more diligent in meal prepping. And then this was a hard one. These two things were very, very difficult for me. And that is, I had to figure out who in my life did I need to forgive. And then I needed to forgive myself. Why am I talking about forgiveness, you might add? Because when we don't forgive people, it doesn't actually hurt that person. It does not throw darts at them. It just hurts us. All of that negative energy comes back to us, and we're the ones sitting there with the egg on our face because we have an attitude with that person, and they have no idea in many cases that we have an issue with them because we have not shared that with them. So we're walking around carrying that dark cloud of nothingness. So how do you work through the process of forgiving the people that really hurt you and forgiving yourself for allowing it to happen, and also just for beating up on yourself as a result of everything that you've had to go through with your thyroid disease journey? How are you going to do that? And then the last thing that I want to have you really think about is, how can you give yourself a break? The first thing that I really, really understood in this platform, process, way, whatever you want to call it, is that when I finally said, Ebony, you know what? You've been working so hard and you deserve a break. That is when I understood why it was so important to have a self-care routine. Because sometimes I just need to sit and do nothing. Absolutely, positively nothing. And that is an amazing form of self-care for me. You don't have to spend a lot of money at the spa. You don't have to go out and do all these crazy things. Sometimes you just need to sit still and be quiet and say nothing in the dark. That's it. So I want you to really truly sit down and think through these things, because these are some of the things that we don't really talk about as a community that are so critical to us becoming the best version of ourselves and minimizing our symptoms. And again, this is something that I've only learned in the last year or so. And I want to share these things with you because they're so important. Because once you get past, okay, I worked on my gut health. Okay, my medication's now in check. Okay, I now did this. Once you get past the tangible physical things, you have to work on that physical, spiritual, and emotional aspect as well. Because we are incredibly lacking in this department. So think about those things and let me know. I'm on social media at Joyful Ebony. Let me know what you come up with and what did you find out as a result of sitting down and just figuring out how you're going to fall in love with yourself again. I'd love to hear it, and I'm looking forward to it. So take a screenshot wherever you're listening on this particular episode and let me know what your takeaway was. So with that, be happy, be whole, and be well. Take care.
Okay, Thyroid Warriors, get out there and take things one step at a time. Remember, be great, reflect on your triumphs, and as always, be well. Take care.